All right, let's jump into this first story. The outrage following Ron DeSantis' ban on sex change surgery for kids. AP News reports parents of transgender kids seek to block DeSantis' ban on gender-affirming care for minors. The first thing I want to say about this is it's always language. They never tell you the truth. This is what got me in trouble, apparently, with one of our guests who was going to come on the Culture War podcast and then did not, is that I'm not here to play games for the left or the right, but that means you're basically going to be aligned with the right. What I mean by that is we've got an editorial team over at Timcast.com. We write news. And one of the articles we were writing, something came up having to do with pro-choice and pro-life. And I was reading this and I got kind of frustrated because there was some quote from some activist. And I said, I'm confused as to what they're trying to say. So I said, I don't think we should say pro-choice or pro-life. Those are political terms. If they're protesting to ban abortion, we should say protesting in opposition to abortion or protesting in support of abortion. So we can just say anti or pro-abortion. And everybody agreed, like that's a fair point. Remove the political terminology from it, be direct. That triggers the left. They get very, very angry. So in this instance, you can see right there in the headline, gender affirming care for minors. That is a leftist term. That is an ideological term to support their ideology. Why is the AP doing that? So somebody at the AP said in our style guide, we are going to just use the language of left-wing activists. Here's what we say. The right would call it mutilation. Okay, I don't call it that. And many conservatives are like, no, that's what, look, I'm saying it is a child sex change surgery and medical intervention. That's just a fact statement. That pisses the left off to no end. If you don't use their language, they like, that's it. They come after you. Whereas the right will just go, okay, I guess.
The left has a very significant authoritarian streak in them right now in the U.S. and in the West. You have to think like they think. If you talk like that's where the whole gender, using someone's pronouns comes from. Like you have to think of a trans woman as a woman. Trans women are women, not trans women are trans women. They make a demand on your cognitive liberty. This is as authoritarian as it gets. They're demanding that you think like them. And it bothers me that liberals, actual liberals in the U.S., are bad liberals, and they don't see that this is authoritarian.
So we got this tweet from Chris Hayes. I love this one. He says, the law DeSantis signed in Florida banning care for trans kids is despicable and a frontal assault on the vaunted parental rights he and his ideological cohort have been screaming about for years. In Florida, you no longer get to make healthcare decisions for your own child. Ron DeSantis makes them. It doesn't matter what you think is best for your kids. Ron tells you. This is the weirdest thing. But I feel like as long as you read the stories, you can see through the thin veneer, the lies. What is he talking about? You can't make healthcare decisions for your kids? No, there's a medical, the chief medical officer or whatever they have for the Surgeon General in Florida who makes these medical decisions on what doctors, basically overseeing how the health system is working. You've got the law, the legislature. Ron DeSantis signed what the state legislature presented to him. They're playing a political game, probably because 2024, but it's all just so crazy how they lie about all this stuff. There is no contradiction in saying a parent has a right to decide what a child learns, and a parent does not have a right to determine if their child should be sterilized or not. Like, at a certain point, the state intervenes to protect children. Under Chris Hayes' argument, he thinks you should be allowed to mercilessly beat your own children.
Well, and
what you think is best for them, right?
He's pro snake handling. Like that's the thing. The state should not step in and prevent snake handling. You're chopping off the genitals of children. If children are gender dysphoric, you wait until after puberty because gender dysphoria tends to go away. The idea that Chris Hayes is saying is that the state should not step in and say you can't starve your children. The state should not step in and say you must provide medical care to your children. Like it's stepping in and saying that it's okay for the state to or for parents to literally allow their children to cut their bodies up. Everyone knows that tattoos have been off limits for anyone under 18, and there was never a stink about it. And now because
it's not. Go ahead, finish.
Just the LGBT lobby and the ideology that comes along with the LGBT perspective now. It's like it's all about trying to shove the idea down people's throats.
I was going to say it's not just surgery; it's the medication too. It's the chemical puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, which also cause sterilization, to the point where even these high-profile websites that are advising on what they call gender-affirming care say you have to preserve your reproductive material, as these treatments, they call it, will tend to remove your ability to reproduce.
I think, too, just people like Chris Hayes, they aren't used to seeing Republicans wield power and fight back, especially on cultural issues. Because, I mean, the GOP in my lifetime has delivered, tax cuts and endless wars, and that's about it. So I think, for the first time to see conservatives wading into the cultural issues and pushing back and fighting this totally nuts stuff is really important. And I think it shocks the left because they're not used to it, but we need to do more of it, because if you don't have a culture, you don't have a country.
It's because when they say boo, when they call you racist or sexist or homophobic, then they get everyone on the right to immediately cave to whatever demands they have, because they understand that they do wield the power of most of the journalists and all of that complex in this country. So if you have the power of 10,000 journalists who can use a bunch of buzzwords and names to call you, you wield a lot of power to stop people from proposing bills that they want to propose, from speaking out on social media in the ways they want to. And the media does the same thing when they use these terms like gender affirming care, which are, to the uninitiated, will read it and aren't going to look into it any further. And all they're going to get from that is evil right-wing guy does evil right-wing thing because they're bad. And I think for the average person who doesn't read the whole article, who only reads paragraph 1, who doesn't look into what the actual meaning of these terms are, that wields a lot of power because people don't look any deeper.
I'm torn. I am. On the one hand, I'm concerned about these children and whether or not these treatments actually are the right thing to do, because the science shows desistance rates are very, very high. We went over this with Lance from the Surfs, around reaching up to 98% or something like that. So most kids go through puberty and then they just stop experiencing this. And we've already seen in Europe, they've been abandoning these procedures. On the other hand, I think if Chris Hayes wants to sterilize his children, we shouldn't stop him. And it's funny because I'm half kidding. The issue here is I'm not a conservative. Chris Hayes comes out and says his children, he has the right to bring them to a doctor and remove their ability to reproduce. And I'm kind of like, well, I suppose the challenge is, do these children have rights to not have their lives irreparably harmed by the actions of their parents? The answer is yes, of course. Just because a doctor tells you to do it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do. But these people are voting to terminate the lives of their children and take away their and their children's ability to reproduce. And I'm kind of like, we're not in a position to assert absolute authority over them to stop them from doing it. There has to be a vote on it. In Florida, the vote has been, you can't do it. Chris Hayes is losing his mind. But if this guy then moves to a state that allows it, like California, it's like, okay, well, the worst case scenario in the end of all of this is the future is conservative. Conservatives have a bunch of kids. Liberals sterilize their kids. It just seems like it doesn't matter in the grand scale. It matters to the individual. It matters to the rights. It matters what we think people should be allowed to do to kids, because those kids are going to grow up. They're going to be very angry. We've already seen it, many detransitioners. But then I'm thinking about holistically the whole world and where we're going. This is a small blip in the history of the United States that I think will cease to exist relatively shortly.
I mean, I definitely agree with you that they're almost, self-selecting out of reproducing, and
Existence.
That's and for us on the right, I mean, that means more votes for us, right? But also, does it mean more violence for us? You look at people like the Nashville shooter or the individual who killed that woman in Arizona. So there is, I think having mentally ill people running around your society is not conducive to a society that is safe and allows for, community flourishing.
This is the big challenge across the board, though, like we see in San Francisco. We want to help people who are suffering. This is one of the challenges humans face, balancing helping people with making sure that the crazy people who are unwell aren't dragging the whole system down. They say when you're sitting on a plane, you got to put the mask on the person. You got to put your own mask on before putting on the mask of the person next to you. So how can we as the United States keep doing the opposite, sacrificing our cities and our economies for people who are not contributing? It's just breaking the system. Then eventually we're going to be left with empty cities and barren streets and no farms and no food, and people are going to wonder how it happened.
It's just so tiring to hear people, like you said, lie. Like hearing Chris Hayes portraying things the way that he does, it's exhausting and extremely frustrating, because there's people that have lives and they go about their day and they don't have the time to shove their face in Twitter or read a bunch of queer theory books, or, and that's one of the things that the left really relies on, is people living their lives and going about their day and not knowing what they're talking about. We talk on this show all the time about the fact that the left has one dictionary, or that we use the same lexicon but a different dictionary. The meanings of words change and stuff. That's intentional. Your average person doesn't know that. Your average person doesn't understand that. So when the left starts throwing around jargon at them, they feel like they're like, I don't know what any of this means. They're like, just stop, whatever you say. And it's such a it's so manipulative, and it's frustrating to see so many people constantly battering you with a message, and that is completely fabricated.
I was talking to someone recently when we were discussing the idea that when you watch the news, depending on where you get your news from, you're living in a completely different reality from the person next to you if they get their news from a different source. And the language does a lot of that in the same way. You could be having a conversation, you might both know the word, but you have your own definitions for what that word means. So you end up with a completely different conversation, and you never actually get to any type of understanding because you can't get past the dialogue that's spoken. And I think that's also a problem when we talk about, you were talking about whether you think that this is a self-correcting problem. That's why they're so good at organizing and why they're so good at recruiting, because recruiting is how they grow. Because if they're not having families, if they're not expanding through their own gene pool, they have to organize through community leadership. They have to organize through propaganda in the media. And they do that very, very well. And I think in social media, TikTok, that is how they influence the next generation of people. I don't think it will be as easy as just something that cancels itself out in a generation or two, because a lot of these people, conservatives included, there was a thing on Mother's Day where it said it was a happy Mother's Day post, and it was a bunch of iPads, because kids are looking at, their parents are putting a tablet in front of them. They're not watching what they're looking at in the media. And that's right. The kids younger and younger are being influenced on websites that are not protecting them. What kid under the age of 13 wouldn't know to hit the I am 13 button on TikTok, right? So the kids, I don't think it's ever going to be as simple as just it's going to be drowned out by the fact that they're not reproducing. It's something that you have to culturally change, whether that's through putting out your own media that will be an alternative source to them, or the type of thing where they need to do better about making sure their kids aren't taking in a bunch of stuff that they don't know. But then what do you do from there? Then you go to the school system. The school system pushes on it too. They really have surrounded the culture in every way. And to me, it sounds black-pilled. I don't think it's that simple.
I'm not suggesting that we just sit back and do nothing and then by having kids. No, I'm saying it's all interconnected. Yeah. The less they have kids and the more the right says we're not bringing our kids to your schools, you will get a natural tendencies towards a culture being developed by the right, which we're seeing across the board with comic books and cartoons, as well as parallel economies. Jeremy's Chocolate and Razors. We got Cass Brew Coffee. Jeremy from the Quartering has Coffee Brand Coffee. A bunch of companies popping up, competing with the establishment that is falling apart. I look at all of these in the big picture, and I'm just like, over a long enough period of time, the future seems obvious, right? I just feel like for me at this point, I'm like, I'm going to invest in one of these companies because it seems inevitable. Sure, there's a bunch of variables. Who knows what'll change? But I don't see how you reverse course and salvage the left. You've got decaying media organizations. They're going out of business. CNN's ratings have dropped below Newsmax. BuzzFeed News is gone. Vice is in bankruptcy. Now, all of these companies, they're losing clicks. They're losing followers. They're freaking out. They're fleeing Twitter. Their influence is crumbling. Then they're sterilizing and aborting their own children. Conservatives are pulling their kids out of these schools. Their influence is going to be gone in 10 years. Then you add onto the fact they're not having kids, give it 20 or 30 years, and you're going to have two new generations entering the cultural space who have not been influenced by their media because their media is ceasing to exist. Disney just announced they're going to be moving a whole bunch of their products over. Was it from Hulu to Disney Plus?
Yeah, they're going to bundle everything so that you can get everything in one place.
But that means they're also locking things up.
They also got rid of a bunch of the like Willow and the really bad stuff that came out. They took like 50 or 60 things off Disney Plus because it's literally just taking up server space and nobody's watching any of it. So.
But I just think all of those things together predict a conservative future. Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast. And there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and we'll see you all there.